issues in terms of funding, because of the nature of what Miami-Dade is and because of what we're looking at, let me ask the follow-up question. And Doug, we'll start with you and go the other way down the road this time around. What is the role of business, or what should be the role of business in helping to alleviate the funding difficulties in education?
Well, I think the first thing business ought to do is address the problem I just talked about. I mean, business people understand how over-regulation undermines the ability to be effective in the private sector. Has the exact same effect for teachers in Miami-Dade. And so I think they got to sit down with the politicians and say, you can't coerce excellence. You know, driving compliance isn't the way to create excellence. You need to create an environment that allows our educators to be innovative, to be creative, and I think that's the core issue. And I think the business community has to sit down with the politicians and say, I understand you run for office because you want to make a difference, but sometimes less is more. Sometimes not passing a law is better than micromanaging how many minutes do you have to do a PE every day, and how many pieces of paper you have to fill out to prove you did that, how many minutes you have to deal with, you know, kids brushing their teeth every day. I mean, you know, we don't have to micromanage everything, and I think the business community needs to stand up and say, we understand it in our business. You know, we understand the danger of too much regulation. We also know the danger of not enough regulation, as we've seen in the financial sector. But the challenge for us in the 21st century, and the business community has a major role to play, is helping us find the right regulatory balance so we don't undermine our human capital, and that's what's happening today.
Eduardo?
Well, going back to what I said previously, the business community is no different in terms of the issue of accountability. In this community, there is very little involvement of the business community in what it counts, which is making our elected officials accountable, making sure that we have higher standards and expectations for both students, teachers, schools, and everybody else. And frankly, it's very disappointing because, and Art is here, you go to the education committee of the chamber, and there are only a few business people who go there. The room is full, but it's mostly educators. And bless his heart, I mean, it's very difficult to get anything done having to do with education because we're there for mostly self-serving reasons. But the people who need to be in the room are the business leaders of this community, both with small and large businesses, to help develop the kind of accountability expectations, etc., that are needed. But that doesn't happen. And in fact, it's the opposite. And what's happening today in our schools is a result of the neglect we're all responsible for. And you see the disparities in the various schools and all the problems that we're facing. So I totally agree with you. But other than the mentoring, which I think is important, and there are a lot of efforts that we could really commend where business people participate, etc. But where it really counts, which is to hold the people with the power to bring about change and make things different, we don't do that. And that is something that we all hope will change.
Well, I would say that one of the things that I've seen the business community do well is really provide some venture capital for innovation in the schools. You know, we're a nonprofit, so we raise money from the business community. And so, for example, Citibank has provided about $5 million just recently across the country for innovations in helping more students graduate high school and actually go to college. And it's really exciting work that's being done, a collaboration. Miami-Dade College is involved and many others. And that kind of venture capital can really move a lot of issues forward. I've seen that done in a number of times. Other companies have done the same thing. Wachovia helped to revamp the way the school district actually trains its principals. I know Bank of America has provided money, really good capacity building money, which many companies don't provide, and that's critical. So I think that's one of the things that companies can do is really step to the plate and fund innovation and get it started as seed funding. I also before anything else. I think what Eduardo was saying about accountability, and I think what it takes is the business people really being informed. I mean, you really have to get your hands around this issue, and you really have to understand public education, and you have to realize it's going to affect your business. If you don't have the workers, if you don't have other companies coming in to bring additional workers, then Florida is going to flounder. And, we'll be saying, well, the last one out goes turn off the lights. So, they have a role to play in advocacy and in venture capital.
Maria, you've been involved intimately in this regard with the Chamber. What's your experience?
I think that apart from funding and leadership and volunteerism in the form of mentorship and internships, et cetera, and plain experience, vis-a-vis different industries and requirements for future workforce, which I think business absolutely needs to continue to do. I agree that the one thing that business must do more of is lend our voice to the discussion, our voice to the advocacy, and demand from our public officials, be they local, be they state, be they national, that we need and rely on the education system throughout for our talent at all levels. And this is our supply chain. And to be honest, and to your point, Linda, if we're going to be competitive in a global environment, which we are in, then we really have to do a lot more than what we're doing. And it's going to require everyone, including business, and maybe even led by business, I don't know. But I think it's that voice that maybe isn't as strong. And to Dr. Padron's point, just in our own education committee at the Chamber, it's true. We struggle with getting more businesses involved. So I think that's the role that business needs to play.
Let me follow that with you, Maria, if you will. You said maybe even led by business. I know you've struggled with it. We've all struggled with it. I hear some frustration in the panel about business not being involved. So what could be done to get business to do, I think what Dr. Padron and Doug Tuthill both hit pretty hard on, was if you want the legislative bodies of this country to act, they're going to need some pressure. How can that pressure be achieved and applied through the Chamber or other business organizations for that matter? But I think the Chamber is the logical one to talk about.
Well, I just think that if there were more awareness, perhaps, of the intricate link between education and and attainment in education and economic development and the vitality of our communities, if that were just spelled out and we knew what the number was, I think that would be a powerful tool for all businesses. Meaning, if it does not impact you today, it will impact you tomorrow, either because you won't have the skilled workers that you need, or because your economy, our economy, is going to flounder because we don't have the skilled workforce to meet the future needs of business.
I know the Chamber does a lot of advocacy in Tallahassee and has people who do that within the Chamber body. Have they been given a mandate from the Chamber in this regard, or will they be given a mandate from the Chamber in this regard to look at educational funding as a key requirement of Greater Miami?
Historically, absolutely. Education and actually many education initiatives really come as part of our legislative agenda to not only Tallahassee, but also to Washington, D.C. And in fact, we'll be going to Tallahassee next week, and Superintendent Carvalho, we understand, will be there at the same time, along with some of our school board members, et cetera. And education will absolutely, having already seen the legislative package, be a primary role in that. And it won't just be focused on Miami-Dade County Public Schools. We have also supported and advocated on behalf of Miami-Dade College. We will be talking about FMAP. So yes, education is an imperative for us.
This week, President Obama suggested new guidelines for educational attainments. At the same time, we are concerned about, Doug Tuthill's mentioned, the teachers here and what they need to do here, meaning in Florida or here in Miami-Dade County, what they need to do individually to attain things. As we look at new guidelines and new requirements for achievement in the setting of coming from Washington or a national picture, then we think about the term unfunded mandates, which is, a local school system will be asked to turn on a dime or move or change its system or add some things to what it's doing. But there's no money that's attached to that. Generally, certainly no federal money, probably no state money, and just be asked to here are your new things that you're going to be doing now, move forward. Doug, would you talk a little bit about that and how the concatenation of those things resonates with you?
Sure. And before I do that, though, Mike, if you don't mind, I'd like to defend business just for a minute.
Okay.
The program that I work with is one as extraordinary business partnership. The way our scholarship works is businesses get a tax credit. They donate money to a nonprofit organization, and they get a one-to-one tax credit. So if I'm Raymond James, for example, and I owe $1 million, I can donate up to $750,000 to a nonprofit organization. That's the organization that I help run. And families apply to our organization for scholarships. The maximum amount of scholarship is $3,950. We raised about $100 million this last year from corporations through that tax credit process. And it's an extraordinary partnership. We do events. I think the reason this program is so popular with the business community is because teachers are, as I said before, are far less regulated than they are in the traditional district schools. A lot of the teachers, a lot of the people that start these small private schools tend to be people who are principals and teachers in places like Dade County, and they get so frustrated by all the mandates from the federal government, state government, local government, that they say, you know, I know how to do this. I know I can do a great job with kids. I know I can attack the achievement gap. Because I'm so overmanaged, so micromanaged, you know, my hands are tied. So they go off and they partnerships in the community, and they start these schools, and they start doing some incredible things. And so I think from a business perspective, they want a high return on investment. They want to see that their investments are paying dividends. And I think we have to, again, I think they want to invest in teachers, they want to invest in parents, they want to invest in kids, but they want to do it in a way that's going to be effective. And it's not effective if, with all due respect, I mean, I voted for him, but, you know, I don't think the President of the United States ought to be the superintendent of schools or the principal of schools in Dade County. You know, I don't know how he can figure out, I'm going to micromanage tenure and I'm going to micromanage merit pay. I'm going to do this in Washington, or we're going to do it from Tallahassee. I mean, I just think that's a fundamental problem. We have extraordinary talent in Dade County. Let the people in Dade County do what they know how to do. And I appreciate the President's motivation, but I just don't think you can mandate compliance. I don't think you can coerce excellence. And so I see, with all due respect, I see President Obama falling into the same trap that a lot of political leaders do, which is I see a problem, and if I just create enough rules and regulations and laws, those will fix the problem. And I think that's backwards. I think what we have to do is say, I have great people in schools, I have great people in communities, I need to invest in those people. I need to give them the support they need. I need to hold them accountable, but I need to give them the support that they need. We've tried this a couple times. I'm sorry to preach. You know, you mentioned FCAT and where that came from. In the late 80s and early 90s, we passed a law called, 91, we passed a law called Blueprint 2000. It was designed to deregulate schools in Florida, or less regulation. And the idea is that we would create we didn't really have standards back in those days. We would create standards, and we would create an assessment to measure how well kids were meeting those standards, but then we'd empower the local communities to create the learning environments, use the pedagogical strategies they thought were most effective to meet those needs. So we're going to hold the schools accountable for outcomes, but not micromanage process. Well, we got the worst of all worlds. You know, we got all this accountability for outcomes, and we're micromanaging processes at the same time. You know, so I'm hated around the state for people because of, you know, my participation in that. My children hate me because of my participation in that. You know, so I say FCAT's a monument to my failure as a politician. I mean, it was a nightmare. But the motivation initially was what I think the right one, which is let's hold people accountable for results, but let's don't try to micromanage educators from Washington or Tallahassee.